Okay, so imagine you had two dads, and one of them tells you, the love of money is the root of all evil, but then the other one says, no, no, the lack of money is the root of all evil. I mean, what do you do with that? That is the exact dilemma at the heart of Robert Kiyosaki's famous book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And today, we are going to unpack the very first and maybe the most important lesson he ever learned. And look, this isn't just a simple disagreement, right? This is a clash between two completely different ways of seeing the world. For Poor Dad, money was this moral problem, something you should almost be afraid of. But for Rich Dad, money was a practical problem, something you just had to figure out and solve. And this huge conflict is what forced a young Robert Kiyosaki to question, well, everything. So you've got these two father figures, literally living in two separate worlds, even though they were in the same town. One was this brilliant academic, had a PhD, and the other, he was a middle school dropout. Let's dig into how their lives went in such wildly different directions. Now, here's the part that's kind of wild. Both of these men were, by all accounts, successful. They both earned a lot of money in their careers. Poor Dad, the PhD, was a respected educator. Rich Dad, well, he never even made it through 8th grade. And yet, one died with a pile of unpaid bills, while the other became one of the richest men in all of Hawaii. You see, it wasn't their education that decided their wealth. It was their mindset. This quote right here, this is basically the entire premise of the book. Think about it. School teaches you all about getting a job, how to be a good employee. But it's at home, around the dinner table, where you really learn about money. For Robert, this meant he was basically going to two completely different financial schools at the same time. One was teaching him about scarcity, and the other was teaching him all about abundance. So this all leads to his very first steps into the world of wealth. The story really kicks off when Robert is just 9 years old. He gets left out of a trip to a friend's beach house because he's a poor kid. And you know that feeling, right? That sting of shame. Well, for him, that's what lit a fire and made him determined to change his life. So he goes right up to his poor dad and asks this incredibly simple question that ends up changing everything. Dad, how do I get rich? But his own father, the super educated guy, he was stumped. The only advice he could give was, you know what, if you really want to get rich, you should go talk to your friend Mike's dad. So what do two 9-year-old boys decide to do? They start a business, of course. And their plan was, well, it was brilliant and also completely illegal. They decided they were going to literally make money. They'd melt down old lead toothpaste tubes and cast their own nickels. I mean, you got to give him credit for the entrepreneurial spirit. Now, when his dad found out about their little counterfeiting operation and shut it down, he didn't yell at them. Instead, he gave them this incredibly powerful piece of advice. See, the real takeaway here wasn't about whether their plan was legal. It was about the fact that they actually did something. They took action. And that alone put them way ahead of most people who just sit around and dream. All right, now we're getting to the main event, the rat race lesson. So with his poor dad's blessing, Robert goes to Rich Dad for some real answers. But Rich Dad's idea of a classroom, well, it wasn't a classroom at all. It was the real world. Rich Dad's deal was simple. He said, I'll teach you, but not like they do in school. You're going to work for me. And if you don't work, I don't teach. That's the deal. He knew that you don't really learn this stuff by listening. You learn it by doing. And the salary for this real-world education, a measly 10 cents an hour. I mean, come on, even back in 1956, that was practically nothing. For 3 hours of boring, tedious work every single Saturday, Robert would get a grand total of 30 cents. Yeah, it didn't take long for him to get fed up. The work itself, dusting canned goods, was just mind-numbingly dull, and the pay was barely enough to buy a few comic books. So after about a month of feeling used and angry, Robert finally decided he'd had enough. He was ready to quit and confront this so-called teacher. He storms into Rich Dad's office and just lets him have it. He calls him a cheat, calls him greedy, says he hasn't learned a single thing. He's basically saying everything that every underpaid, frustrated employee feels. And this is Rich Dad's brilliant comeback. You see, he wasn't just being cheap. He was deliberately making Robert feel that push from life. He was teaching him exactly what it feels like to be trapped, to work for a tiny paycheck, and to blame your boss for all your problems. This is the lesson he wanted Robert to feel in his bones. The rat race. It's this endless cycle that's driven by two big emotions. Fear, the fear of not being able to pay your bills, and then greed, the second that paycheck hits your hand. Get up, go to work, pay bills, and then you do it all over again. Rich Dad wanted him to see the trap for himself, not just hear about it in a lecture. So, to break this cycle, Rich Dad makes this absolutely shocking new offer. Keep working, but now you work for zero pay. Nothing. The goal wasn't to take advantage of him, it was to force his brain to stop obsessing over a paycheck and to start actually seeing the opportunities to create value that were right there in front of him the whole time. And that leads us to the final and most critical shift in thinking. Because this isn't about working harder for your money. It's about thinking in a totally different way. This one comparison says it all, doesn't it? Poor Dad's advice was study hard so you can find a good company to work for. But Rich Dad's advice was study hard so you can find a good company to buy. One of those mindsets creates an employee. The other creates an owner. It's that simple. So you have to ask yourself, who's really running your financial life? Is it the fear of being broke? Or is it the greed, that desire for more stuff? Rich Dad taught that the real key is to stop just reacting to those emotions. You have to use your mind to observe those feelings of fear and greed and then start thinking strategically. And there it is, the first and most important lesson. The rich don't work for money. The whole goal isn't just to get a bigger paycheck. It's to understand how money actually works so you can make it start working for you. It's about creating assets that generate income without you having to trade your time for it. So here's the big question this lesson really leaves us with. What is driving your financial decisions? Is it the fear of not having enough? Or is it the intellectual challenge of using your mind to create more? Because according to Rich Dad, the second you choose your mind over your emotions, that's the moment you finally begin to escape the rat race.